I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, the podcast where we explore how our inner lives shape the way we love, connect, and grow. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn explores a conversation many people feel but rarely say out loud: the grief that comes with aging. From the loss of roles, energy, and relevance, to the deeper questions about identity, meaning, and mortality, this episode gently walks listeners through the emotional and spiritual realities of growing older. With compassion and hope, Dawn reframes aging not only as a season of loss, but as an invitation into deeper wisdom, presence, and purpose. Today's episode is called Growing Older with Grace, Grief, and Hope. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill.
Welcome back to Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Today we're stepping into a conversation that many people feel, but very few people say out loud. We're talking about aging, grief, and the quiet losses that come with growing older. This is not a light topic, but it's an honest one, because if we live long enough, every one of us will walk this road. The changes in our bodies, the changes in our roles, the changes in how the world sees us, and the very real grief that can sit just beneath the surface in this season of life. But this episode is not only about loss, it is also about meaning, about perspective, and about how growing older can invite us into a deeper, richer version of ourselves than we ever knew before. So settle in with me. This is a gentle conversation, but an important one. The process of aging is not for the faint of heart. My doctor actually told me one time, aging is not for the wimpy. I really did not want to hear that. So much about growing older feels like a slow series of losses: loss of muscle, loss of energy, loss of memory, loss of drive, to name only a few. If the first half of life was about building a family, building a career, building some security, the second half can feel like watching parts of us slowly unravel, not all at once, but little by little. And it can be deeply unsettling to watch our bodies and minds change while still measuring ourselves by the standards we used when we were younger. There's also a quieter loss that people don't talk much about, and it is this: it's the loss of feeling seen. We can start to feel invisible to the younger generation. It can sting to feel tolerated instead of sought out, to realize we are much lower on the priority list of our adult children's life who once had a tremendous need for us, to feel less than relevant than once we were. Everyone over a certain age knows this feeling, but it's not something we say out loud very often. And if someone is walking through this season without a partner, alone in this reality, it can feel even heavier. So the honest question becomes, what is the upside here? As our body changes and our energy wanes, what are we supposed to replace our youthful vibrancy with? Every stage of life has its challenges. Middle school is brutal. Parenting young children is exhausting. Midlife can be disorienting, but the psychological challenge of aging is unique because behind all these losses is one undeniable truth. We are moving toward death. The fading hearing, the faulty memory, the slower pace, they all point in the same direction. Earlier in life, we could push that thought aside. We could stay busy enough to ignore it, but as we age, the body gently, and sometimes not so gently, brings that reality into focus. And here is where people tend to split into two camps. Some believe that death is the end, that when we die, that's it. Others believe that death is a transition to something more. If you fall in the second group, these losses can begin to look different, because in some very real ways, we have been practicing this our entire life. We have all experienced smaller deaths: the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, a move we didn't want, a dream that did not unfold the way we hoped. And often, in hindsight, we can see that what we felt like was an ending was actually a doorway into something larger, something we could not have stepped into without first letting go of what was. That is the rhythm of life: losing and becoming, shedding and growing, dying to one form so we can step into a fuller form. Our identities, parent, spouse, professor, caretaker, are real and meaningful, but they are not the whole of who we are. As aging gently loosens our grip on those roles, we are invited to step into deeper identity, one not defined by productivity, appearance, or relevance. And this is where a different kind of richness can begin, a richness of perspective, a richness of wisdom, a richness of presence. All the major faith traditions point towards the same idea, that in order to become more fully ourselves, we must slowly release the smaller versions of who we thought we were. Growing older is not only about loss, it's also about expansion, about becoming less attached to the temporary and more aware of the eternal, about stepping into a larger version of ourselves, perhaps a larger experience of the world around us. There are very real, very incremental losses that come with aging. Some are obvious: forced retirement, losing the ability to drive, the death of a spouse, the person you plan to grow old with, changes in hearing, eyesight, energy, and health. And then there are the quieter, more abstract losses. This is not how we thought it would be. This is not what we imagined these years would look like. This is not how I thought my life would end up. That kind of grief doesn't come and go. It tends to sit just under the surface of our awareness, and at times it can feel relentless. And in this season of life, grief often has a particular rhythm to it. So let's gently look at what that can look like. You might be wondering, what are the stages of grief in older adults? These stages are not linear. They are not neat. People move in and out of them, and they can help us understand what is happening internally. First is denial. In older adults, denial can look like refusing to talk about the loss, avoiding conversations that bring it up, or dismissing reminders, quickly changing the subject, or speaking as though the person is still somehow present. It is not dishonesty, it is protection. Then there's anger. Grief often comes with anger at the world, anger at the circumstances, anger at oneself, sometimes even anger at the person who has died. These feelings can feel confusing and irrational, but they are part of how the heart processes deep pain. Then comes bargaining. This is where the what-ifs live. If only I had done this. If only we had caught it sooner. If only I had said. The mind tries to rewrite the past in an attempt to ease the pain of the present. Then comes depression. This stage in older adults is often wrapped in loneliness and isolation. There can be survivor's guilt, a sense of being abandoned, a temptation to withdraw from others to avoid feeling this kind of loss again. Then comes acceptance. Acceptance does not mean the grief is gone. It simply means acknowledging the reality that the person is not coming back. Even in acceptance, waves of sadness still come. Love does not stop just because acceptance has begun. And then comes integration. This is the stage of integrating the loss into our daily life. We don't have to move on. As we integrate the loss, we can move forward carrying the reality of the loss with us while staying engaged in our life. We carry the story of the loss, and that is how we stay connected to who or what was lost. We move forward, not away, as if the loss had never existed. This makes me think of Billy Graham. He wrote a book titled Nearing Home. In his book, he writes from the perspective of an older man reflecting on the life he has lived while gently preparing for the life to come. This is not a book about staying young, but about growing older with grace, depth, and purpose. He speaks honestly about the physical frustrations and losses that come with aging, yet quickly reframes this season as one of spiritual refinement rather than decline. Graham suggests that later in life is a time when many of the roles and identities we've depended on begin to fall away, giving us the opportunity to discover who we are apart from what we do. He addresses loneliness, grief, and the reality of mortality with compassion, while weaving in a steady message of hope. Aging is not an ending, but a preparation. A central theme of the book is that we spend much of our lives preparing for careers, families, retirement, and very little time preparing for eternity. Graham challenges the cultural idea that older adults are no longer useful and instead highlights their powerful influence through wisdom, prayer, encouragement, and presence. Nearing home ultimately invites readers to let go of bitterness, forgive freely, stay connected to others, and deepen their spiritual roots. It leaves you with the understanding that growing older is not about becoming less, but about expanding into something more eternal. So do people grieve differently when they're older? Yes, they often do. Not because it hurts less, but because they've done it before. Older adults have usually experienced multiple losses. Because of that, people around them sometimes assume they know how to handle this, and sadly, that assumption often means they receive less support, not more. But having grieved before does not make grieving easier. In fact, it can make it harder. It can create a quiet pressure that says, I should be over this by now. I've done this before. And when they're not over it, they can feel inadequate or ashamed for still hurting. What older adults need is not less support, but more gentleness, more presence, more understanding that grief at any age is still grief. And the most healing thing we can offer someone walking through it is not answers, it's our steady, compassionate presence. So how can we live well as we age? First, the physical. Care for the body you will live in later. Aging well physically is less about intensity and more about consistency. What helps most is strength training. Even light weights, 2 to 3 times a week, preserves muscle, balance, and bone density. Walking daily helps your brain health, mood, and joints and heart. Protein intake protects muscle and energy. Sleep hygiene, brain repair, memory, emotional regulation. Hydration, often underestimated, hugely impactful though. Regular vision and hearing and bone checks prevent isolation later, and limiting sugar and ultra-processed foods reduces inflammation, which is aging's silent partner. This isn't about looking young, it's about staying capable. Second is the emotional. Learn how to process loss before your losses increase. People who age well emotionally have learned to name their feelings instead of stuffing them, grieve well, big and small losses, release perfectionism and shame-based thinking, develop self-compassion, stay curious instead of rigid, and ask for help without embarrassment. Aging brings more loss. If someone hasn't learned emotional processing skills earlier, and this season can feel overwhelming, the emotional skill that predicts aging well the most is flexibility. Third, relational. Invest in people before you need them. One of the greatest predictors of healthy aging is quality relationships. What helps is maintaining relationships across life stages, not just peers, staying connected to younger generations, learning how to repair conflict instead of avoiding it, letting go of bitterness and old resentments, being someone who reaches out and not only someone who's waiting to be invited, and having 2 to 3 people you can be fully honest with. And the fourth is the spiritual. Develop an identity that is bigger than your role. This is huge for aging well, because aging strips away roles, career, parenting, productivity, appearance. If someone's identity is built on those, aging feels like an erasure. People who age with peace have a sense of purpose beyond productivity, practice of prayer, reflection, or meditation, comfort with silence and solitude, an understanding that they are more than what they do, a framework for meaning, suffering, and death, and gratitude practices. They are not trying to hold on to youth. They are growing into depth. In summary, the toolbox for aging well, people who age healthiest tend to have built these tools long before they need them. The area of the physical, the tool is strength, movement, sleep, and nourishment. The area of the emotional, the tool is flexibility, grief skills, and self-compassion. The area of the relational is connection, repair, and community. And the area of the spiritual, the tool is identity beyond roles, meaning, and peace. The big idea, aging well, is not about preventing aging. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle it with grace, resilience, connection, and hope. And that doesn't start at 70, it starts now. Aging is not only about what we lose, It is also about what we gain: perspective, wisdom, depth, a clearer understanding of who we are beyond what we do. Grief will be part of this season. That is simply honest, but it does not have to be the whole story. If we learn to care for ourselves physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually, we begin to build the kind of life that can hold on to both the losses and the growth that comes with aging. Because aging well is not about preventing aging. It's about becoming the kind of person who can walk through it with grace, connection, and hope. And remember, it's never too early and it's never too late to start building the tools you'll need for the years ahead. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Heart, Mind, and Purpose. As we close today's episode, we are reminded that aging is not just about what we lose, but about what we gain: perspective, depth, and a clear sense of who we are beyond what we do. Dawn offered practical tools for aging well physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually, encouraging listeners to begin building now the kind of life that can hold both grief and growth with grace and hope. If you found this conversation helpful, we'd love for you to share it with someone who could use some encouragement. You can also find resources, listener handouts, and more at dawnmariehill.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode as we keep exploring how the heart, the mind, and our sense of purpose all work together for a life well lived. Until next time, thanks for listening.